Everyone, Yo Soy Neighborhoods Fresno. I'm your host, Edna Collins. Today we have
Ball 2021.
There we go.
Fresno. Yeah. Stoll, yes.
Leon. Okay. Seen Rocio many times. Give us a little debrief story about yourself and background.
Actually, I was born in by Modesto, Lodi. There. Migrated all up and down California. I did too. Sometimes when I was with my grandma, because she in Manteca, we actually worked the fields too. That was my
and
my
I know that
beginnings.
You had and that began when you were a teen or young?
Actually, when I was younger, I actually felt within myself when I was a young kid, something was awry. I just didn't have the words for it. I didn't know what it actually touched bases on what I was experiencing. I saw the girls, I wanted to be them. I wanted the long hair, I wanted the frilly dresses, the ribbons in the hair. I wanted the experiencing of putting on makeup. I even tried several times to be my authentic self at the absence of my parents, or my mom and my stepdad. When I was about, I didn't know if she would accept me any further than what was already being the obvious, that I was effeminate. So if I was getting oppressed and beaten and whatever, just for the perception of being gay, I knew I'd get worse or even disowned for being trans. And so I never crossed that boundary for survival reasons.
Of course.
I tried, when I was a kid, this was back in the 80s, when you don't talk about being gay. Because you were either bullied in school, you were beaten and humiliated. And I actually, unfortunately, had to take a defensive role. And it happens to a lot of bullied teenagers, that when someone starts bullying others and they're afraid they're going to get bullied, they're going to bully someone else. And that's a protective measure.
You progressed, here in Fresno, did you find that, other than bullying, name calling, just from adults, or did you feel uncomfortable?
Oh yeah, even in when it escalated, back again, I want to put the focus in back in the 80s. If anyone remembers the AIDS epidemic.
Exactly.
Those were my teen years. So those of us that were being perceived as gay were automatically perceived to have AIDS. And so we were chased with rocks, sticks. I've been beaten. I was left in the street, beaten and left for dead, in the middle of an intersection, next to a...
It was, how did you feel then? When you...
In the 90s, I was being more aware of what was going around in my surroundings with my community. I didn't take a really big stance in being an advocate at that time. I was just barely finding myself at that moment as I understand the whole trans concept. So I didn't know where I was being acne and don't want to deal with it. But I was doing temp work for a while and I liked it, but the places that I was going to, one of them was at a manufacturing plant. And I didn't really care for the supervisor. Because again, society perceives you, if you're effeminate, that you're gay and easy. And so I got hit up on a lot.
Really?
And I was not aware of my rights of sexual harassment at that time. And that was just because they perceived me to be gay. One other employer, which was the temp agency, because I wound up getting hired through them to be one of their representatives, I was fired for being dressed in drag. And coincidentally, I was not the only one. It was planned between me and another coworker who was female, who was lesbian, and she dressed up male, I dressed up female. She dressed up in like a Dracula or something, and I dressed up as a vampirist, Spider Woman.
It sounds like a Halloween day.
It was, and you can imagine the outfits. But, and it was in good taste because again, I was in the office. I already knew what the limitations were, but I was fired, but not the woman.
Isn't that the craziest?
And so, and again, I didn't know what my rights were as far as employment rights. And back in the 90s, you really didn't know because there really wasn't any that existed by law.
Well, it was
So,
broad. It wasn't.
it was
just,
broad. It
yeah,
just wasn't focused.
It wasn't.
And so we
distinct.
were left in the dark, like, well, what is my rights? You know, so we really didn't have anything that was concrete. That is my current place of employment. Wonderful team there. I couldn't have asked for a better employment, but it didn't start like right off the bat there. There was a little hidden thing that happened that not a lot of individuals knew about. I actually got to know the employees of Central Africa, and get this, one by one, by one, by one.
So you never got any counseling through all of this? Or?
I did. I had to. I actually did it on my own. I actually asked for help on my own. I was going through drug addiction, alcoholism.
Well, those are actually, I mean, from all the bullying and harassment, I mean, it wears your nerves down. I'm sure that wasn't a voluntary thing.
No, it was all part of a coping mechanism to try to hide the hurt that I had, and that I knew I was going to be coming to, you know, to realize once I start opening the doors of, you know,
Saying, okay, this is where I need to be and this
Yeah.
is who I am.
yeah. So it took a lot.
An
took a lot.
evolution, period.
And so what I did is I took a lot of all that negativity, I pulled it and I used it for my own positivity, my own strength, and it helped me to achieve my associates over at Fresno City College, as well as to develop my own nonprofit, the Fresno Spectrum Center. And a lot of people will say, you know, well, why'd you put this center? I mean, you know, they can happen at dinner. They can happen while I'm asleep. I just don't answer. Don't expect me to answer while I'm trying to snooze and get a good night's rest. But I do wake up the next morning, and that's the first thing I reached for is what messages have I received. Any instant messages. I check the phone mail, you know, for the center.
Well, let me ask you a question now. Your Spectrum Center is specific. I mean, are you like on a list for, as an easy call for people that need help? Emergency call?
We do try to offer connections for those trained in crisis intervention, suicide prevention. So we do get those calls. We also get calls for individuals not in crisis, but just want an ear to listen to, and we get them connected to what's called a warm line.
That's good.
And so those are through the mental health departments.
Well, through all this, I mean, one of the things I know that you were sharing with the city of Fresno,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Dyer, well, it was Chief Dyer
It was
at the
Chief
time.
Dyer, yeah.
At the time, and
Oh, yes.
what committee was that?
Actually, it was for the Chief Advisory Board that I volunteer for. And it just so happens that Chief Dyer and I have an ongoing joke that I was a thorn in his side. Because for the longest, I kept telling him I was sending mail or email, however I can get connected to him. I was telling him, you know, sending him messages. Chief, you need to, you know, focus on the LGBT community. Chief, you know, the LGBT community needs awareness. We need to get connected. I had workshops where police officers would come in and tell our community members, you know, what their rights are, what can they do when they're victimized, you know, how to better protect themselves, you know, what to do when they need to place a call for service. We were just getting all this going on, and I'm like, Chief, you know, and so
And this
finally,
is before the board was
this
created.
this was before I was invited
Oh,
to be a part of
okay.
the board, and so finally, Chief, I guess he finally gave in and said, I need to tell this guy just, you know, to shut up already, you know, give him a spot on the board or something, right? So he sent me an invite.
So
and,
that means our new mayor, who is the chief,
uh,
is in other words, he's open to listening to the community members. That's a
Yes.
very good thing.
Yes, he was very open, and we had a very great connection, which I hope the next chief that comes up is inclined to have with the community.
Have you met him yet?
I haven't met him yet because of the pandemic. We haven't had a board meeting, but we had a very successful relationship with Chief Dyer, or I'm sorry, Mayor Dyer. Back then, Chief.
Right.
We had a very successful relationship to certain points where we had victims of our community. Either it was a murder, like the Casey Haggard case, the other case that happened on Belmont Avenue with a cross-dresser, and then another LGBT community member that was found drowned in one of the water
The
waterways.
canal.
And so, and they were going on unsolved from what the community knew. But what the community did not know is that the chief and I were in constant connection, because like every other week I was calling up chief. Okay, where are your detectives? Where are they at with their investigation? Families want to know. They need updates. What are I mean, I just kept needling every time we had a meeting, or I would even.
So it sounds like you were able to complete.
Yeah,
cases.
I was just because I didn't want those cases to be left aside, go cold, and then forgotten about, because our community members are more valuable than just being forgot about.
Of course.
Whether they be
Everyone.
alive or dead.
Yes.
And so, and that was the whole purpose of me being a part of that board.
Well, let me ask you a question. Since you've been on that board, were you able to make headway with some of the community people to start to understand trans life?
Yeah, actually, it even started there with the police department. Believe it or not, we actually had workshops established. Compliments of Chief Dyer or Mayor Dyer. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's so hard to release that. But yeah, we had workshops. I was facilitating workshops to all the new officers coming on board, and it was happening like every other month sometimes. And I was giving trainings, workshops, LGB and more trans-focused
Kind
trainings.
of give us touch on what type of training.
It was more like to get them involved in the terminology, to begin with, LGBT terminology.
Can you share with the audience what that might be?
LGBT, we do have members of the community at large that do not know the acronym LGBT. So it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and then Q is for queer questioning, depending who the facilitator is. And then added also is 2S, which stands for Two-Spirit, for those in the Native American Indian populace.
Oh, that's
so,
very nice.
They're also included, yes. And so I give them those terminologies, because we do get asked, what does the B mean, or what does the T mean, or whatever. And so I break that down. And then I give them a breakdown of proper interaction with the transgender community. Because we wanted to now focus more on positive interaction, because I was telling Chief, or I'm sorry, Mayor Dyer, that a lot of the interaction that our trans community was facing was humiliation, because of the fact that the officers going out to these service calls were misgendering.
Okay, when you say misgendering,
Misgendering.
let the audience know what misgendering means.
Misgendering would be like, for instance, an officer coming to my place, and I'm dressed the way I am today, or this evening with you, and then the
And
officer.
by the way, you look gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
I love the gowns.
And I'll give you the 20 later after the video. But so the misgendering is when they call me by my dead name, which would be Leon. My boy name is what we call a dead name. I don't go by that strictly anymore. Calling me sir or mister, that's misgendering. Using my dead name is a form of misgendering, because you're not validating that person's existence.
So is that like insulting you in a
yes.
way?
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's a definite.
And people, well, all right. I know that in Fresno, I kind of see it as a little Bible Belt area.
Mhm.
I grew up here, but I was gone for 32 years. So to me, it just seems like coming back here, it's a whole different atmosphere. It's not, I don't want to say the word progressive in certain areas.
Certain spots, not all, not all. We do find certain areas that are still very conservative in Fresno County.
What are those?
Porterville comes to mind right away, especially when they had one of those proclamations for the LGBT community for the Pride Month and had it revoked. The council did.
They revoked
They
the
revoked it, the
proclamation?
proclamation, and they also, the mayor that had, acknowledged it, got replaced. When you say a small Bible belt, I'm like, how small is your belt? To me, it's very much conservative, especially like in Hanford. My husband and I went to an outreach a couple of years back, and we could not stand too close to each other. We were told we could not stand too close to each other. We could not show public displays of affection because it would not be seen right with the community.
Let me ask you, who told you that? It was like one of the people within the mayor's group?
It was one of the organizers of the event we were going to, who already knew about the council members that were going to be there, and some of the vendors that were going to be there that are from Hanford. And so they wanted us to make sure that we were on our best behavior so that, we wouldn't get any backlash.
Does anybody know it's 2021?
I wish! I mean, it would make things a lot easier for our community,
Right. So it sounds like all the 6 counties that consist of Central California have some inkling of non-acceptance.
Yeah, don't even get me started with Clovis.
No, that's okay.
Don't even get me started with Clovis, especially the Unified School District. That is a headache and a half.
How so?
We've had a lot of run-ins with them, especially with trans issues, whether it be clothing, email.
Okay, that's it.
So you want to trust science? Go ahead, but we're going to be trusting my science.
Yeah, right.
Is what I say.
Well, your internal science. You knew
Yes.
from the very start.
Yeah.
You weren't just acting out. It was something that you sensed.
Yes.
This was you, but it still took you a while to transform to who you are today.
Yeah.
Because of the non-acceptance around you, and that's a kind of a sad thing. You probably went in circles for a little bit.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
So it's wonderful now that you're a community advocate. You're strong enough to go out there and support some
Yes.
of the youngsters, teens, young adults that are here in this area. Right.
We actually.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Do you see that there are more conflicts with parents that?
At ages in their teen years, or even in their early adolescence, is going to be people of color. Because I can tell you already, just from the Latino community, although we try to inform and educate, their mindset is so stronghold onto their upbringing that it's hard to change those minds. I've tried. I've even developed workshops in Spanish to do for the Latino community.
That's wonderful.
And I've done a few, and some are sitting there like, and you're like, oh, come on, you want to smile, you want to accept this information. Right. But they won't. They won't. They're so animated.
Outwardly. But in their heart, you feel like they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That they
Outwardly.
want to, but, they've got to
Well, that's why I said, you said people of color, you said very
yes,
nicely.
because as well as the African American community, I've gone to facilitate and also participate on a panel with a few workshops for the African American community. And the backlash we got, I was like, oh my God.
I mean, that's a wonderful thing.
But
because
it's those connections that we make that make it all worthwhile, even if it's just one connection for those workshops. I happened to be at the Tower Theater along with the protesters this past Sunday in my direction. And she was telling me that the lady I was speaking to, she goes, be careful, here they come.
Give everyone an idea of the makeup of that group. They're young,
Oh,
older.
different ages, a lot more older than there were younger men, dressed in fatigues, pants, and then black t-shirts. One of them was wearing a kilt and a t-shirt. They all had yellow bandanas. A lot of them wore hats and glasses, and I'm like, what are you trying to hide? If you're out there spreading hate, show your face. I stood my ground. I did not budge. I didn't look like I was intimidated, because that's what they want. They want you to be intimidated. They want you to be afraid.
They want you to cower down.
And no, I refused to do that. And so I was speaking to one of the leaders, because I'm going back this Sunday to finish what I started, which was to produce that video portion. So we'll be going there this Sunday. And that's one of the segues to the video, is the fight for the Tower Theater, for Transgender Day of Visibility. Because the church that's wanting to buy it is saying that they're not accepting, but they're willing to allow LGBT individuals into their congregation if they want to be fixed.
Okay.
We're not broken.
No.
And so, you know, I'm going to be doing a video that aims at equality and our rights to exist the way that we are, no matter what.
Oh, that's a wonderful thing. That's,
thank you.
I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
Because we need people like that here. We need people to, yeah, you want to be your authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
Just like
Yeah.
I'm on my authentic self, and everyone else around us, why not you?
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know, some of them don't want the kids, but they'll certainly have the furry pets, right? And the house, and the picket fence, and the 2.5 cars, you know, or 2.5 kids, or however they want to, you know, whatever floats your boat, right? But we all want that dream, you know, no matter how we identify, no matter who we love. It's more difficult than Snapchat. I think I've, you know, done Snapchat a lot easier than I can Instagram. I don't know how that works, but and then also we have Facebook, which is, everybody's got Facebook nowadays, right? So we have Facebook, as well as our own YouTube page and our own website. So just looking up the Fresno Spectrum Center, you'll find us through all this. And we're also on Google search.
oh, okay.
I keep seeing those numbers go up. I'm like, I love it, right?
That's wonderful.
So, and then they can instant message us, which is the easiest one, because I get those instantaneously, the instant message.
And that's
on
good to
Facebook.
know, especially if you have youth out on the street, or someone that's in danger or needs some help with identification. They can get a hold of you pretty easily.
Yeah, a lot faster with instant messenger. We do have our own office phone, which is 559-319-8471. I had to remember, so like, because we haven't used it in a while. 559-319-8471. And we do check those, not as often as we'd like. It's periodically we'll check it. We'll check it one day, and then maybe 1 or 2 days we'll check it again, because we haven't been getting that many calls since pandemic. You know, everything's been shut down, but we still do, you know, check in on our voicemails.
So that's wonderful. So I have one little thing, so everyone can understand. The city of Fresno had you do a policy not too long ago, right? Kind of share with the audience
Okay, so
what that was about.
yeah, that was even the kicker for me. I wasn't expecting that. Actually, I got an email from one of the officers. We had been working on the policy changes for the Fresno Police Department on their interaction with the transgender community, the LGBT as well, but more focused on the transgender community, and how to process them if they're having to be jailed, or how to do searches, body searches.
Can you share a little bit of that?
Sure. So for individuals that are going to be going under a body search, if they identify as male and they're trans male, they cannot be searched by a female officer. If it's a female officer that is there, they need to wait for a male officer to arrive to do a search, which is vice versa. If it's a male officer and needs to do a search on a female trans woman, they cannot do it. They have to wait till the female officer arrives to do a search.
And that's just the pat down?
That's just the pat down search.
They don't get, and now the jail would be a different...
That's a whole different ball of wax there. They have to abide by the laws of gender identity, of course, in the state of California, and process them. If they're transgender females, they go into the female population. If they're transgender males, they go into the male population. However, if the individuals, the officers that are doing the incarcerating, feel that that person is going to be at risk, they put them in solitary confinement.
Oh, for their protection.
For their protection.
Well, I think that's a wise decision because...
And that's what we were able to work out. And then if there's any humiliation or inappropriateness between the officer and the individual calling for service of the trans community, there was going to be disciplinary action.
So let me ask you, give us an example of what that would be.
Misgendering, as I mentioned earlier, that's one of the examples that if an officer constantly misgenders after being corrected by the individual, being approached by the officers, that individual has every right to call their sergeant and ask for an investigation for disciplinary action. I can't remember everything, but because it's been so. But it shows that there are steps in place to protect our community,
right.
And so.
Well, it shows Fresno's progression.
Yeah, and so we were also working on now changing that policy and tweaking it, not just for the community and how Fresno police officers interact with the community, but now we were already fixing the policy for staff.
Oh, that's nice.
Of the force. So we were working on that, myself, another individual, and my husband and one of the officers, Horsford, Officer Horsford, we were actually all working together to change that policy for the staff of Fresno PD. Because there are individuals that identify somewhere in the spectrum, and so we were trying to make things better for them. Well, lo and behold, I get an email and from Officer Horsford, or Detective Horsford, and she tells me, she goes, you know what, Leon, she goes, I know it's been a long time, which was like 4 years ago when we started this, and it just fell on the wayside because things had happened with Chief Dyer transferring to Mayor Dyer, and then pandemic and everything, so I hadn't heard hide or hair of this policy.
Wow.
So I get an email and she says, the city of Fresno looked at our policy draft. And I'm like, you're kidding me. And she goes, no. She goes, they're looking at it right now, and they're looking to tweak it to help put it into policy for the city and county of Fresno employees.
That's wonderful.
And I was all like,
that's wonderful.
You're kidding me. And they're like, no, seriously. And I've got that email printed, and I've got to say, because that was an indirect thing that I didn't have planned to happen.
It was a surprise.
It was.
I think it's fabulous, all of what's happened to you in the last few years since we've spoke.
Yeah. A lot has changed. And all for the better. And especially now that I'm Miss Transball, people ask me, so where are you going from here? And I just tell them, forward.